All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We have the pleasure of having one of our Innovia employees, Steve Walt. He is our Director of New Client Engagement, and he's going to be presenting on utilize sales coaching and training to increase your revenue. And we do like for people to participate during our webinars. So if you do have any questions during the webinar, please go ahead and raise your hand and we will get your questions answered. And as a reminder, we are recording this and it will be posted to our on-demand webinar library for you to review again or share with anyone. And you can find our library under our resources tab on our website at innovia.com. And like I mentioned, we do encourage you to ask questions during our presentation. So please feel free to either raise your hand or type them into the questions box, the chat box, and we can get them addressed at the end of the webinar. So now I'm going to turn it over to Steve to kick off our presentation.
Well, good morning and thank you, Angie. Welcome everybody to our webinar today, Utilize Sales Coaching and Training to Increase Revenue. So it's that time of year. I love to do these type of presentations coming off a calendar year. Normally, at the end of each year, the numbers are usually the same. Over 50% of the salespeople did not hit their quota. And it's even worse for sales managers. Over 60% of sales managers did not hit their quota. And a lot of things can contribute to that, and it could be as far as, all right, was the pipeline not set? Was the goals too high? Where did we miss? But one things that we have to focus on are what are ways that what can we do to increase revenue? Right, so that's going to be the focus of this webinar. So as Angie said, my name is Steve Waltz. I'm the Director of New Client Engagement. And for some of you that have been on my webinars, I appreciate being back on. And for new folks, just a little bit of background about myself. I've been in the great field of sales for over 35 years. I've been in the automobile industry. I've worked for a Fortune 50 pharma company for about 25 years and been here in the Microsoft ecosystem in Innovia for about 9. And I've had many different roles. I've carried the bag. I've did a lot of drive-alongs with salespeople. I've been involved in marketing panels, new product launches, sales management, leadership, and really be able to kind of provide a 360 view of taking a look at ways that we can, as an organization, increase sales. So you can see here the agenda. And one of the things that I have on here is discuss why a sales training plan is important. And we're going to go through the numbers of sales and why sales training is important, but also talk about sales coaching, understand what is sales coaching. All right, telling versus coaching. And then, how do you build a sales process and be accountable to it? And we'll talk about that. And lastly, I didn't realize it until I got into this channel, but really understanding change management and how some people will fight change to the death. And they're either going to make the change or not make the change. And we need to know that. What I have up here is talking about the numbers for selling. And the reason I bring this up in a lot of my presentations is because they're so important. And the first one, this one will just eat at me and a lot of sales managers, that over 50% of salespeople don't even ask for the sale. They'll do a great presentation. They'll talk to them. What do you think? And that's it. It needs to be, if we need to find out if the product's a fit, and we need to ask. And what makes it even the numbers more profound is if you look at the next one, over half the salespeople don't even follow up. Think about a time that you went to buy something and you were excited about it, and the person that you were buying it from was supposed to follow up and never did. And you almost had to go chase them down. But the fact that half don't ask for the sale and over half don't follow up, well, the numbers say that's just a bad thing. Because if you look at the next one, 80% of sales, 80% are made between the 5th and the 12th contact. Yet less than 10% of the salespeople out there make more than 5 calls. So if you're just relentless on follow up, if you're not afraid to ask somebody for some business and you follow up, you're going to have a nice career in sales. And if you actually train yourself and become a student and embrace it, you can be an elite salesperson. And that's what we're really going to talk about. We want to be the A players, the top of the A players, right? And the next one is really scary, especially in this world of social media and LinkedIn and access to YouTube videos. But 90% of salespeople have never read a book on selling. And yet, who's in charge of generating revenue for your company, right? And it just it's always just, if you think about when you hire accounting people, you train them. Oh, this is how we do our, we're methodology. This is how we send out AP, our AR. This is how we close the month. And in manufacturing, that you talk to through the whole process. But in salespeople, it's like they just get thrown out there. And if they haven't really read and stayed up to speed, it's going to show, because the numbers even show that about 2/3 of salespeople really don't understand or have a playbook or process. They just wing it. And so these numbers are scary. And the Wall Street Journal last January, not this January of 23, said there was over 750,000 openings for professional salespeople, 750,000. And what I have here is just a kind of a humble reminder. If you're leadership or sales management, and it really depends on, it doesn't really depend on what department you're in, but nothing happens until something is sold, right? And I've kind of borrowed things from Jack Welch and other folks, but the quote I have here for me is that you can have the greatest product or services in the world, but if no one knows about it or buys it, what value does it provide? And as a salesperson, we need to understand that we need to believe in our company, our product, and our service so much that if there's truly a fit and it's going to help the client do their job and they don't buy it, did we really provide value? So that's a reason why we need to really work on this, because the next thing I have on here is that we want salespeople that want to sell, not need to sell. There's a huge difference. It's really of any job, right? Because when you need the job, you need the income, you need this, you're just trying to do this. When you want to sell or want the job, you just approach it differently, right? Because you got old school, you got new school. We need to be going to school, okay? And those A players are ones that they're lifelong students. How can I get better? I mean, right now we're in the third week of January, and I've been doing this for over 35 plus years, and I've already read 2 books on sales this year. It's just that commitment to excellence. Then, and lastly, to understand that when the client says yes, that's when the work begins. And to be that top performer, right? And we're going to get into the sales training coaching model here, but the mindset needs to be, okay, we got them, we did this whole process, they said yes, but now it's onboarding them, right? Are we working them? Are we helping them with our accounting department to get onboarded? Do we have a process in place for our delivery team? If we're delivering a project or some sort of service, or if we're delivering a project, we have delivery set. The salesperson needs to own that process. So let's talk about why invest in a sales training program. And I think the numbers kind of showed you, why that is. But who generates revenue for the company? And the thought that if the folks out there don't really try to grow and understand or adjust and change, we need to as a company, because a lot of companies don't have it. As I talked about earlier, we'll plug and play people in delivery or financial or whatever, but salespeople, for some reason, it's like you think if you just hire a salesperson, they're going to know what to do, right? We need to have a process in place. Because you can see the second thing I have listed here is how do you communicate your business objectives and execute on them, right? So you got to think, how are you going to accomplish your revenue goals for the year? Are you going to expand the market? Are you going to penetrate within your current customers? Are you going to develop new products, right? And then, okay, how are you going to execute them? So that's a great way to align what leadership or how you want to go about this year on how you want to sell. Because if you want to, let's say you have more complex products, well, you might need to have more training on those products, but not just on the product, of how it works, but how it's going to help the customer achieve their goals. Okay. And so this is how you can utilize your training to teach your sales team how to execute your business objectives. Because the way people are buying have changed over the years and just so recently. And I have probably changed in my career 4 or 5 times. And I would say just in the last few years, we have this thing called AI, right? And it's changing it. And the numbers of how people are inbound, they don't want to deal with, a lot of people don't want to deal with salespeople. They're doing the research on the internet. Okay. So if we're selling the same way we did 10, 15 years ago, it's not going to work because, they want to have a different conversation than they did years ago. So what have you done to keep up? So we need to have the resources in our sales training program to talk about that. So how do you put together a sales training program? So you could be a small business, you could be a large business. Right. I came from a large pharma company. It had its own self-sustaining sales training program. And I've been in where I was in the automobile industry, we had a smaller training program. And being over here, it's where we actually have engaged another company to help us engage in putting a sales program together and help us work on engagement. So, but when putting one together, the couple things that need to happen. One is that the frontline sales manager, depending on the size of your company, your VP of sales or your sales manager, they must own it and lead it. Okay. I've learned over the years, unless somebody owns something, it just doesn't get done. And so the sales manager, which normally has the hardest job in a company. Okay. So if you think of what a sales manager does, what do? They manage salespeople. Okay. They're managing salespeople and they're facing with the customers and they're hearing the good and the bad. How did we let you down delivery wise, support product wise? Okay. And then they have to help the salespeople put out those fires, but then they got to report it to leadership how things are going. So that is a tough job. So then we kind of talked about our objectives before. So we need to determine our framework for training. So if our objectives this year are to increase revenue by growing within clients, then we need to do some account management training this year, maybe some selling within, how to create that and determine our content. Okay. We determine this is what we want to do. What content do we need to do that? Oh, so we need to work on maybe improving our sales cycle, or we need to work on, having better marketing materials. And then once you put that together, then you need to be able to measure and assess the progress, right? At the end of the year, was it successful? And get feedback from salespeople. Most salespeople are more than happy to oblige on the feedback. So I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the sales training part of it. And this one is really, I think, lost in, especially if you're using CRM, and we'll talk about CRM, but you have sales coaching. Okay. And what is sales coaching? And it's really coaching anybody in any position, but more so in the sales aspect of it. So if you think about the coaching model, and there's a lot of research out there, but I just want to go high level and just break it down for you. The coaching model is based on the belief that the question is the answer. Because especially with a sales manager and a salesperson, we do not want the sales manager to be the chief problem solving officer. Okay, telling their sales team all the time what to do. Because what happens if you're a salesperson? Well, you start becoming dependent on that. Oh, what should I do? What should I do? Because in the bottom I have here, people want to know what to do, not be told what to do. So by having that question-based one, we're allowing the salespeople or person in your department to really self-formulate the answer. And you can see here the coach is responsible for people finding the answer themselves and developing their own problem-solving skills. And this works out well because a lot of sales managers, if I talk with them, they'll say, oh, I want a sales team that, that can be dependent, that they're good on their own. They only need me when they need me. They don't need me all the time. But yet they're being the chief problem solving officer and telling them what to do and answering all the questions. So their behavior is not kind of what is driving the performance of their sales team. So by having those clairvoyant conversations with their team and helping them develop their own problem solving skills, they're going to develop better salespeople, right? And when you do it on your own, you own it. And when you own it, it gets done. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So I just changed the color of the slide to keep uh, your attention up on this. But what I have here is what is the overview of a coach's role? And it's interesting because as a coach, it's easy to point out the good and the bad. And sometimes we do, but we need to focus on strengths. And there's a book called Strength Finders, and it really gets into how you really hone down on what your strengths are by building on your strengths. It actually helps you overcome some of your weaknesses. Okay. But when you're talking with somebody, we can't just be pointing out, oh, you do this wrong, you do this wrong. What are you going to do to fix it? We can talk about their strengths. How can you use your strengths to help you with this, right? So we're trying to facilitate getting them in the mindset of how do we make things easier. And one thing that I've learned over the years, everybody thinks that if you're a manager or somebody in a senior position, that you always have the answers. Well, you don't, and we don't, right? What we need to develop is having the right questions because we're going to get stumped when we're talking with somebody as a coach, all right? Maybe for some reason they're not putting things in the CRM, or for some reason they're not following up correctly, or for some reason they get stalled in this part of the stage of it. And they're not able to identify really why they don't really understand. Maybe we don't understand. And that's okay, but we just need to keep asking questions to develop that because by doing that, we're empowering people to be accountable for their success and their failures. Okay. Because it's like having a conversation with your kid, but if you tell your child what to do all the time, you have a great conversation, they really don't do it. But if you get them involved and get them working and get them doing it, they're becoming more accountable. And lastly, it's requesting change and growth. And by doing that, it talks about as a forming and guides. And we're going to talk about it on the next slide. But when you request change and growth, it took me a long time to understand what that meant. Because if you look at the picture I have below, so there's Coach John Wooden. I'm out of South Bend, Indiana. John Wooden was the coach of South Bend Central High School back in the day, and went on to the UCLA to be one of the greatest coaches. And one of the things that John Wooden has done is his team. They just embraced him. They would die for him. But one of the quotes I like is that a coach is someone that can give correction without resentment. That's leadership, right? And we need to be leaders, and we need to be careful of pointing the fingers and telling people what to do all the time. But in this process, we also need to understand that the person must be coachable. And some people aren't coachable. And you'll find out very quickly. And the ones that aren't coachable, that has to be a one-off discussion. So in this model, okay, they must be willing to ask for help. It can't be us all the time pointing things out. And so we need to make it to where it's a safe environment when you're talking with your reps, or if you're a salesperson, you need to be fearless and ask for help. Hey, I'm struggling here. I need some help. Okay. And then in the coaching conversation, we need to go outside our comfort zone of feedback, right? We need to listen, not have the answer planned already. We need to listen. Okay. And there's got to be trust between the two. Okay. Because we all have blind spots. I don't know if you've ever had a 360-degree personal evaluation done. I tell you what, you want an eye-opening experience to do that because you go over the strengths and the weaknesses. And the first time I did it, I mean, it messed with me for 2 weeks. And I felt like, wow, I didn't really, is this how I perform? But I realized that the intent of that discussion was to make me better because I asked for it. Okay. And that's how you build trust and that's how you grow. Because when I have the next piece here is action, you got to be willing to follow up on agreed upon steps. Now, what do I have here? If you're the one being coached or you're the one coaching, when you're working with your manager or whoever, you mutually have to agree upon the next steps. And if not, that's going to cause an issue because to make progress, we got to put things into action. And one of the hardest things to do is for the coach and for the salesperson is to check the ego at the door. Because if the true intent is to make us better, to grow as a person, as a salesperson, as a sales manager, help the company achieve its revenue goals, we need to check the revenue at the door, and that's sometimes not the easiest thing to do. All right, because what I also have here is really understanding the role of CRM. And CRM is not a salesperson. I, I've done presentations on it, and that can be a separate discussion if you're interested in CRM and how you can utilize that to help you make a better salesperson. But it's a tool to help you sell more, right? It's electronic filing cabinet, basically. And what I tell salespeople is, because some salespeople don't want to use it, they don't believe it, but man, it's a powerful tool. Now, I want you to understand something. The more love you give it, it's going to give it back to you, right? If you get it set up correctly, okay, here's my contacts, here's their email addresses, here's their extension numbers, okay, and you can use it to create your opportunities and activities that will help you follow up. It becomes a potent thing, and we need to make it easy for it. But I see so many people become these CRM jockeys where managers just look at spreadsheets all the time, and they almost forget that, oh, this person makes a lot more calls, or this person's putting a lot more in than this person. Well, but the other person that put half the stuff in could have twice as much sales volume as the other one. And we can't lose sight of that. But we need to understand how we can help build the CRM. Okay. And I don't want to get too heavily involved in the weeds, but those are things that you can talk about through sales training on how that can help you. All right. So those are things I wanted to hit. The last thing I have on here for this webinar is some bonus questions and bonus tips for 2024. Okay. As a sales trainer and a leader, and when I do presentations, I talk to sales teams and individuals. These are some of the tips I came up with. And the first one is to be bold. Ask for what you want, right? We need to get rid of that kind of maybe speak. What is that? You think about it when you're dealing with friends, family, or even people you're trying to sell. We have this kind of maybe passive language speak. Is it okay? I've been thinking about this. Does this work for you? Is this maybe all right? No, we got to get rid of that. If we need to be direct, okay? If you want to ask somebody, it's think about it. You run into a friend you haven't seen for a while. It's been years. Hey, Steve, how you doing? Great, Bill. Nice to see you. Hey, Steve, we ought to get together sometime. Yeah, Bill, we should. And you walk away. What happens? Nothing. Or, hey, Bill, nice to see you. Gosh, Steve, I haven't seen you for a while. We should get together. Yeah, Bill. Hey, how about next Wednesday or Thursday for dinner? Let me get back with you. So, asking for that next step, right? So we need to be bolder on ask for what we want. Now, here's one. The next one I have here is basically setting up a conversation. Your next call that you're going to have with somebody. What is forgotten a lot is what's the thing that every sales engagement needs is the greeting, a quick hello, right? Hi, Angie. Welcome, everybody. Happy Tuesday. And I can't tell you how many emails that go back and forth where people don't even put your name. They just put a body in. And if you're a salesperson, you're kind of, it's making that a connection with somebody. You need to put their name in, right? And a greeting. Now, if it's a back and forth after 8, 9 times, I get it. But we need to basically have that greeting. But also, we need to hit the high level overview of the conversation early. Because when you're talking with somebody and you want to get into the weeds right away, that's not the best time to do it because they haven't made that switch yet. They're kind of assessing still. So by explaining that high level overview, what you're going to talk about, hey, Bill, nice to see you. Hey, just want to let you know that we're just going to talk about some things that are going to help us achieve our goals this year or whatever you're going to talk about, right? And to do that, the next statement I have here is, I want to do that, but let me ask you this. I know I have an agenda. But what would help you? What would help make this call a success for you? And by doing that, what did you just do? They're going to say, oh, stick to the agenda, or maybe this. And now you're making the call about them. And it should be about them. The best salespeople I know make it about the client and helping the client, right? Because the next one kind of follows it. We need to be a master of listening. by asking questions and actually listening versus already having a predetermined response. You think about your friends or whatever that you're talking to, you tell a great story and they're kind of, and then they kind of respond back and it's totally different. You're like, yeah, I just wasted that time. They didn't listen to me. When you're engaging with a client or anybody, this is where knowing your process will really help you. Okay. And I think a lot of people, the reason that they kind of bring things up because they don't know where to go. So if you're in a sales process with somebody early on and you ask them a question and their answer is totally different, because I think there's a fear they're going to say something I'm not ready prepared for. You listen and then you can say, oh, that's interesting, right? And then you can direct the conversation from there. But they'll tell you how to sell them if there's something to be sold, idea, service, product, or whatever. The next one I have here is kind of what we're trying to do here. Sales is a conversation. Don't make it robotic. I can't tell you how many times if I talk with people and they'd go into presentation mode. Boom, like they're in front of somebody, like they change their gestures, the way they talk, and this is how I have to do it, and they're missing the point because people, we said earlier, people don't like to be sold things; they like to buy things, right? So by having a conversation with them and make it more comfortable, they're more apt to share with you. And the last tip I have here, which I think is one of the most important of any sales process. I read some information that SalesGrady put out that 60%, over 60% of the reasons why deals stall is there's no planned next step. You have a conversation, great. You didn't leave enough time. Okay, well, I'll catch up with you later. By mastering the next step, you should have your sales process, right? If from hello to sold, right? It could be a 5-step process. It could be enterprise, whatever your process is. Okay. You need to have one. And then if agreement is in place where you guys are whoever you're working with, if there's a fit and an agreement to move forward, well, we need to get commitment, right? So what I'm understanding that you feel this is comfortable with you, or we need to get so and so on a call with so and so. Yes. Well, great. Well, then you've got them on the phone or a Teams meeting or whatever. That's the time that you book it. Okay. Hey, I'm looking at my calendars. Let's pull up calendars. If they have to get back with you, I get it. I understand. But you have them right there. And if you have access to your calendars, get it done there. And by booking it or having a plan is if they can't, I understand. So when do you think you'll know? I'll know by Friday. All right. So if I don't hear from you by Friday, Monday, I'll reach out to you. Okay. I'm going to put a note here. Oh, by the way, would you want me to, you want to book sometime on Monday so we can just come back to match calendars, or what would you prefer? All right. That was fun, except for the technical difficulties. I hope everybody got something out of the webinar. And right now, Angie, I wanted to open up for questions.
Great. Thank you, Steve. So great tips. Thank you. We got one that is going to be a little tackle for you. Do you
Okay.
have any do you have any tips for transitioning a technically minded person into a sales role, i.e., sales engineer?
Um, yeah, it's a great question. When I was with the pharma company, I sold nutritional products, and the dream salesperson was a dietitian that could sell. Well, there was one. Okay. And then and then in this world here, it's the skill sets. What I would recommend on that conversation is really trying to put a program together, and I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you, but to ask them, all right, are you comfortable talking with people? Right, you should know that. Um, let's have there's and maybe there's some books out there, because what we tend to find out late in life as a salesperson, because I don't know anybody except I should take that back. My son went to Purdue for the sales and sales management training program. But years ago when I did, not many people went to college or got trained to be a salesperson. They just kind of end up in it. Okay. But there's an emotional side to selling. And so there's gray area. So these are conversations I would have. How, are you able to deal with gray area? Because when somebody doesn't get back to you in a month, you start getting upset. But as a pre-sales role, I think the keep in mind one is that we're here for the client. We're here to help the client achieve their goals. And we need to put in a process of place, depending on what this role of this person is, to help understand what they're doing and then how we can get them and learn the sales process. So I don't know if that was helpful for you or not.
He says yes, thumbs up.
Awesome. And
Great.
there's a lot of resources. You can go to YouTube, but there are a lot of sales books out there too. And there are some actually, there's a book called Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play. And that was a book that Microsoft had written for partners, basically for enterprise sales. So I don't know if that's a book you've ever heard of before, but it's really dealing with, because it used to be years ago, you'd have one or two decision makers, and it used to take maybe a month or two. And then over the years, the sales cycle has changed. Now there's 5 to 10 decision makers, and the sales cycles can be over 6 to 12 months now. And so it's just really learning to adapt to that. But that book really addresses that.
Dave, do you have the title of that?
Yeah, it's called Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And I did put that information on those books in the chat, and I have a couple other links for you in just a moment. We do have our resources page on our website, and you can visit that at inovia.com/resources to quickly access all of our Business Central content and events. All right. And just want to thank everybody again for attending, and visit that resources page. And also there is the Innovia Conversation podcast on there as well. Steve is one of our hosts for that. Him and Jeff have a lot of podcast episodes. So if you're on a long trip or you just want to sit back and relax and listen to some podcast episodes, click on that and browse through that selection that we have. And we do have our Innovia customer conference coming up, Innovia Con. So be sure to check out that in the resources tab as well for our upcoming conference. That's going to be in Denver, Colorado in May, on May 16th and 17th. And I'll put that individual link here in the chat for you. All right, well, Steve, everyone, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon on another Innovia webinar. Take care, everyone.